You ever get a letter so ridiculous you have to read it 3 times just to make sure you're not dreaming? Maybe even let out a laugh, not the good kind, but the kind that says, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Yeah, that's how my war with Pineview Estates started. Not a fight over money, not a spat about the color of my mailbox. No, it started with a thick, fancy envelope threatening fonts, and all dropped right onto my workbench, sandwiched between my tools like it belonged there. It said in polite but pointed language that I needed to move my entire house. A house I'd designed, sweated over, built with my own 2 hands, because according to their new map, it sat a few feet over their shiny made-up boundary. Let me back up a sec. You need to understand this wasn't just any house. This was my legacy. My grandfather's boundary markers still poked out of the ground, weathered but holding firm, laid there long before anyone ever dreamed up Pineview's manicured HOA fantasy. I'd kept every deed, every survey, even the original blueprints tucked in a metal file cabinet older than most of their board members. So when I read that demand relocate my house like it was a couch, I could just scoot over. I had to laugh. You know what I mean? The audacity. But beneath that laugh, something inside me sharpened. I knew exactly what they were doing. First thing, I drove into town straight to the county clerk's office. The clerk, old guy, glasses slipping down his nose, barely looked at the screen. "Your plot hasn't moved in 50 years, he rasped. "If someone's boundary shifted, it wasn't yours." I thanked him and headed home, a slow burn starting in my chest. That should have been the end, right? But you know how these things go. People like that, they don't know how to take no for an answer. So I wrote back. No flowery language, just plain truth. My land was never part of their HOA, never would be, and if they set foot on it again, I'd treat it like trespass. Maybe I added a little zing at the end, suggested if they wanted to move something, they should start with their own expectations. Next day, I hear tires crunching on gravel. Never a good sign out here. Big, shiny black SUV practically gleaming with entitlement. Out steps a woman who just looked like she'd been practicing her HOA president smile in the mirror every morning. Introduced herself as Karen. Yeah, that happened. Clipboard in hand, assistant in tow, she started talking about community standards and harmony like my house was some pimple ruining her perfect little world. She didn't wait for an invite, marched right up my path in those clicky heels eyes, sweeping the place like she was already designing the brochure for Pineview's next expansion. I let her talk. She expected me to fold, maybe even apologize for building my house on my land. Instead, I just pointed to the fence line, told her plain and simple, this land was held together by law, sweat, and stubbornness, and I wasn't about to move it for anybody's decorative zoning. She called me uncooperative. I called her delusional. Her assistant scribbled away like he was observing a wild animal at feeding time. "Expect to hear from us again?" Karen said, her voice tight, eyes flashing, the kind of irritation you only see when someone used to winning starts to lose their grip. "Make sure your GPS is working when you do," I shot back. "Wouldn't want you confusing imagination with reality again." The next morning I tried to focus on real problems. My forge needed new insulation, the hydraulic press was sputtering. Figured I'd just ignore HOA Fantasyland. But as I drove out, my phone pinged a motion alert on one of my cameras. I barely glanced. Just a blurry shape near the fence, probably a rabbit. Or so I thought. About an hour later, I pulled back into my driveway and my stomach dropped. There it was, a white utility truck, hazard lights blinking, Pineview logo shining proud. 2 other vehicles full of ladders and tools sat nearby. And on my roof, boots, men tearing up my shingles, my front door literally off. Its hinges, pieces of siding already yanked off. It was like watching a tornado in slow motion, only this one wore polos and safety vests. For a second, everything went quiet. Then I moved, grabbed my shotgun, not to threaten, but to make damn sure they knew this was serious. I stepped out, didn't aim at anyone, but I made it clear I wasn't about to stand by while they ripped apart my home. "You drop everything and get off my house. Now." My voice echoed across the yard. One guy held up a clipboard, started mumbling about authorization. I cut him off. "The only schedule you're on is the one where you leave before this gets uglier than a county fair pig contest. That got their attention. One kid practically fell off the ladder in his rush to get down. They scrambled, tripping over tools, arguing among themselves like a bad slapstick show. And then I saw what really set me off. They'd pinned my dog in a wire enclosure like he was some afterthought. That burned hotter than anything else. I called the sheriff right then, kept my tone even. No misunderstanding here. Just trespass, plain and simple. As the sirens approached, the Pineview crew piled back into their truck, retreating in a cloud of dust. The sheriff arrived, cool as you please, deputy, snapping pictures, documenting every scratch and peeled shingle. I showed them the footage. Those guys had come while I was gone, bold as daylight. The sheriff just nodded, muttered civil dispute like he already knew how these stories go. Still, he made them leave and warned them not to come back. But I wasn't letting this slide. I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Eleanor. No nonsense. She looked over everything, their fake coordinates, my camera footage, the letters. When I mentioned the shotgun, she didn't blink. You established a perimeter, she said. That's your right. Then the real fireworks started. Pineview filed a lawsuit, claimed I'd threatened their workers, caused emotional distress, obstructed lawful maintenance. According to them, their guys were just doing their job, and it was my aggression that caused injury. Never mind that the only one hurt tripped over his own 2 feet. I read their complaint twice. They painted me as some wild-eyed recluse defending stolen land. The real kicker, their new survey, surprise, surprise, now showed my house creeping over into their turf. Eleanor just shook her head. This isn't about your house, she said. It's about precedent, expansion, control. She was right. If they could push me around, they'd bulldoze the next guy too. So I got an independent surveyor. Harold Oldtimer didn't trust digital anything, walked the lines himself. He looked at their map, scoffed. This anchor point doesn't even exist, he said. Someone drew this with a crayon, not a compass. He proved my lines were solid. There's nothing but smoke. Eleanor connected me with a private investigator, Valerie Sharp, as a tack. In 2 days, she found out Pineview's survey company was partially owned by their own board member, Classic Fox, guarding the hen house. Then someone slipped an anonymous memo into my mailbox. Pineview had planned this boundary adjustment weeks before they ever sent me a letter. This was never a mistake. It was a setup. The more I dug, the clearer it got. These folks weren't just greedy, they were methodical. I brought it all to Eleanor. She laid it out like ammunition. Harold's survey, Valerie's paper trail, the secret memo, photos of my ruined roof. We're not just defending you, she said. We're forcing them to prove every inch. We filed a counterclaim, trespass, property destruction, fraud. Eleanor told me, record everything, stay calm. Let their own arrogance trip them up. Pineview switched tactics. Glossy flyers started popping up, painting me as some dangerous loner anti-progress. Karen went on a local podcast talking about obstacles to community harmony. I watched, almost impressed by her nerve. Eleanor advised me to keep quiet. Instead, I hired a structural engineer to document every bit of damage they'd caused, every cracked beam, every loose shingle. Vandalism with a power drill, that's what it was. Valerie found more emails between Pineview and local officials, talks about strategic corrections, weeks before they ever came after me. All of it carefully documented. And then, as if on cue, Karen sent me a friendly email suggesting we settle quietly. I declined, blocked her number. I was done playing nice. Eventually, it all went to court. The place smelled like old wood and stale coffee, the kind of room where truth either gets sharpened or buried. Pineview's lawyers strutted in, Karen leading the charge, smile just as bright as ever. Eleanor laid out our case, Harold testified, calmly dismantled their fake survey. Land moves slower than your argument, son, he said. Got a laugh from the gallery. The engineer showed the structural damage, made it clear what they'd risked. Valerie traced the corporate connections, showed the judge exactly who benefited from the mistake. Emails, financial links, everything. When Karen took the stand, she tried to spin it as an honest mix-up, but under cross, she contradicted herself. Timelines, authorizations, all of it unraveled. Even the court reporter looked up at one point, surprised at the mess. The judge's tone changed. He called for a criminal review fraud, falsified records conspiracy. Pineview's attorneys started looking more nervous. Karen's smile finally slipping. The next day, the county produced login records. The altered maps were uploaded by a Pineview consultant with direct financial ties to the board. The silence in that room said everything. Final witness, a former admin from the survey company, described how data was changed to fit what Pineview wanted. Not for accuracy, but community optimization. She just read the steps, didn't even need to accuse. It was devastating. The last hearing wasn't dramatic, no shouting, no slamming gavels, just the steady weight of truth landing piece by piece. The judge laid it out. Pineview trespassed, altered records, destroyed property. This wasn't civil negligence, it was willful fraud, intentional misrepresentation, the kind of stuff that gets DAs interested. Karen's composure cracked. For the first time, she looked less like a director and more like someone who'd just been handed a reality check. The judge sent the case for criminal review, named the charges property damage, falsification, conspiracy. His tone never rose, but you could feel the weight of it. When it ended, I walked out of that courtroom with Eleanor, no victory speech, just a sense of clean air. Valerie gave me a nod like, we did it. Back home, I rebuilt. Replaced every board, every shingle this time with help from people I trusted. Set new boundary markers, concrete posts carved deep private property. Not subject to HOA authority. Not to provoke, just to remind. On the gate, I added a smaller sign, a little humor after all that mess. Not relocatable, not negotiable, still standing. And that's the truth. Pineview faded from invitations, became a cautionary tale. Me, I got my peace back, the land the same as always, my dog snoring on the porch roof, whispering overhead. Here's the thing, if someone ever tells you to move your house, make sure they bring more than a letter and a fake smile. Justice is slow, but when it lands hard. So what do you think? Where's the line between community and control? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And hey, if you've ever tangled with an HOA, I want to hear your story. Hit like, share your experience, and let's talk about what real justice looks like.